Supercharge community, how is it going? It's Hero Mentor joined by HoarderGamer. Today, I'm pretty sure we're saying this correctly. Isaac Robinson Smith
You got it.
is
You said it
joining
all
us.
right. Yeah.
Awesome. It's always a risk for me. I don't know because I don't know. I'm Canadian, so sometimes our
Yeah.
the way we read things is wrong. But how you doing today?
Really good. This was a really fun opportunity. I love talking. When you brought up earlier that this is going to be just a great conversation, like
100%.
our talking, the way we were talking earlier, I was like, oh, these guys are really cool. I'm excited to be here. So thanks for having me on. And
It's
um,
it's
finally
not
being able
a
to talk about this has been a relief.
it's not one of those like sit down job interviews where we ask a question and
No,
then we say,
no.
okay, wrap it up. Next question. Here you go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If
Like
you start
we,
with the question, what are your strengths and weaknesses? I'll be a little scared. Just,
if if you were an animal, what would you be and
Yeah.
why?
Right. Yeah, I know.
I've always loved that. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, really, if I had the
Yeah,
power to do that, I would not
I
be using
know.
it for this job.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'd be for something different. So
Right. Yeah.
Porter and I have taken the time to look at your IMDb to get familiar with what you've done and to get an
Yeah.
idea as to who you are and what kind of roles you look forward to. However,
Yeah.
our favorite opening question is: we know what you've done. However,
Yeah.
what we would love to know is how you got this started. Like, what kickstarted this
Yeah.
journey for you with acting? Because we all had that
Yeah.
dream growing up.
Right. First of all, I know that I'm glad the question is we know what you've done from an acting standpoint, not just like your life. We know what you've done.
We know what you did last
um,
summer.
Yeah, I know. Oh
Yeah.
no. Yeah, so I have been very thankful for a life surrounded by theater since I was a kid. My mom was a theater actor, completely immersed herself in theater since I was, born basically. The joke I like to say is I feel like I was born backstage. Like there was never not a time where I didn't know like what audiences were for and what theater was and how acting worked and what musicals were about and all of that stuff just sort of was imbued within my existence starting from when I was as long as I can remember, and that's sort of been the genesis point for all four of my mom's kids. I have three other siblings, and so she was kind of the introduction to it all. Like she showed me my first shows, and like I remember watching a lot of movies growing up, and I always had this sense of like performance and acting and being part of something creative was always like the way to do it. I never knew that there was this other side of the world where like kids or anybody didn't like really have that as part of their existence growing up. So I feel really lucky because I had that like baseline. And then my brother is only a year and a half younger than I am. And so he and I sort of were really good scene partners, essentially. We would like make up stories together and play together and create our own episodes of television or animated shows that we loved watching, things like that, doing all the voices and stuff. And one of the biggest ones I think for the two of us was Star Wars. When we learned what that was, we were like, "Whoa, this like whole thing we can create, and this whole world we can immerse ourselves in." And so we started to make our own stories with like the action figures. And I remember I had this old camera, and I would create my own like intro with it was so all this stuff. So like I've been part of that kind of mind frame for a very long time. But then I didn't really understand that it was something to do until I was about 8 years old. And I saw my first magic trick as a kid. I was really into magic when I was little. I went to a theater arts school, or not theater arts. Well, I did go to theater arts school, but I went to like this summer acting thing for kids when I was little for theater. And there was this guy, James Wheatley, I'll never forget. He showed a magic trick where it was like a box that had nothing in it. And then he opened it and it still showed nothing. Then he reached inside. A second later, there was a handkerchief out of nowhere, and it blew my mind. And I was like, "What is this? And how do I get involved? And what just happened?" But there were two things that happened in that moment. One was I really want to know how this was done, but I also want to create that feeling that I just felt for other people. And so that was how I was like, "Oh, this is something that I can actually actively do for the world." But I've also been a singer since I was a kid. I started singing when I was 2, and love music and how things sound. So that's where the voices thing kind of came into play. It was like I loved listening to how things sounded and what they were made of and the components that brought things together. So I would be imitating things all the time. Like I think the first voice, my mom says the first voice I tried to imitate was her, but I couldn't really speak yet. And so
That's
like I would
risky.
just try to look. It is, yeah, yeah. I'm already getting in trouble. but I would like figure out because when I hear speech, I hear it as music. I don't hear it as just people talking. So I would like try to imitate the music of her voice, and then that sort of evolved into animated shows or things I would watch as a kid. And like my mom said, there was like a 2 year streak of my brother and I imitating Baby Gonzo from Muppet Babies, like forever.
Ah,
Like, and it was so. So there's that, and then uh, there was another story that she'll never let it go, but I think it's great. But there was and I've told this before, but it's funny. There was a time where I was like walking around the living room, saying the same. I was a little kid, like 3, saying the same thing over and over again, but really no words, no discernible actual things you could understand. But the music of what I was saying was the same. And then finally, after putting on the Little Mermaid VHS, realized that I was doing the Poor Unfortunate Souls, the Ursula song, like the monologue she had. And my mom was like, "Oh, there's something here. Like, there's some." So, like, that was the beginning of it all, with just like hearing things and loving them and trying to reproduce them. Then, cut to high school, I started to do imitations for my friends, and I became the guy that did voices. And I went to a performing arts high school, so that was really nice because it was a huge environment of really amazing and prolific artists and different kinds of minds and different kinds of attacks on how to do things artistically. But I never really thought of it as a job. I was just like, oh, I do voice imitations. I've been doing it with my brother since I was little, and this is just something. But they liked it, and so I was like, there's some sort of power here that I wasn't aware of. That like they're affected by like how I'm doing this imitation, like they're laughing or they're drawn in by my presence, which I thought this is really cool. Um, but then where it all changed for me was I saw an episode of this interview show, which a lot of people listening probably know about or have seen. If you don't, look it up. It's Inside the Actor Studio at James
yes,
Lipton. Like,
yes.
yeah, like the pinnacle of actor interview shows. It's so well done. And they had an episode one Sunday. They were interviewing the cast of The Simpsons, and it's a show I loved growing up. And when I watched those human beings that were like, like these people, these are just people. And when I watched them do all of these voices and these characters that I loved so much, like I like to believe that this is sort of what people hear on the other side of stuff that we do. But like when I watched them, I was like, this is like a magic trick on its own. It's like they are creating these characters out of nothing, and I can perfectly see what they are and who they are and what their attitude is. But then that's when I figured out, I was like, oh, this is a career. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Like I knew the voices came from somewhere, but I didn't know that it was something that you could actually do for a living. And so, and what I loved is it combined voices and sound and music and performance and acting and playing all that stuff in one position, one job. And I was like, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I don't care how I do it. I don't care where. And that was almost 17 years ago that that moment happened. So from that point forward, I went and took classes at my college. I went to UC Irvine for school, got my degree in theater, continued to do various things there, and then worked at Universal Studios Hollywood and Disneyland as a performer on and off. Eventually got my agent, and then continued to work at classes and all that stuff, and then eventually got to here. So that's like that's the sort of short version of how it all began, but like really just the love of what it is how it all started. And I frequently credit my mom for thank her for being like, thank you for being a person that supported this life and wanted me to do it, and not just saying like, yeah, figure out a real job or something, like, you know.
Yeah.
There was never that. There was always this environment of, yeah, this is what our family does. We create. So I
Uh,
love that. But
I
that's how
love
it
that
happened.
as well because, like you know, mentioned a lot of families, a lot of parents are like, no, 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 you're going to be doing this. This is just a
Yeah.
hobby. It's a phase. But like when
Right.
you have that natural like passion, it's like it's undeniable. And the fact that
Yeah.
the fact that the first voice you mimicked was your mother's,
Yeah.
that's risky business because I'd be like, are you
Yeah.
mocking me? Like, are you mocking
Right.
me
Yeah.
right now? But like,
I
she saw
know.
it and she's like,
Uh,
wait, there's a skill here. There's a power. And
yeah.
I believe I've seen clips of that interview with the Simpsons cast. And it's
Yeah.
my daughter, she recently fell in love with voice actors because she watches a lot of anime. And now she's hooked on Marvel Rivals. And she was
Yeah.
listening
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
voices. She's like, I know these voices. She literally spent 3 hours time going through IMDb and just going down this voice actor hole and just being like,
Yeah.
whoa, they do all these voices. I'm like, yeah, my good friend Richard Epcar is known for 1,200 different characters. I'm like, it's crazy
Yeah.
how how you're able to do this. And
Yeah.
so I do have one more question to ask before Hoarder dives in,
Yeah.
and that is, when you were growing up and you became an adult and you're doing your
Yeah.
own grocery shopping, doing all the adult
Right.
thing, did you ever find yourself playing with voices in public settings to like
Sometimes,
cashiers,
yeah.
or just having fun with it?
Yeah, the one time I did it publicly, I guess, and usually it's to myself. I would be like, "Oh, I got to remember that guy, or I got to remember this person, or like that's a really good voice to like, um, and that's I've been thinking about as far as I got with like the public version of it. I will say that my friends had me order pizza once as Christopher Walken, I think, back in college. I want some cheese and thick crust, whatever that was. Uh, it's really terrible. It's like the impression. Like there's a lot of impressions that I did that were not. There's some of them are better than others, but like there's those voices that are like I'm doing the impression of the impression, and so that was one of them. But they're like, do it, and I was like, fine. But the thing that I do now in public that's just more observational is a lot of my work is comprised of, or a chunk of my work is comprised of looping for movies and television. If you guys know what that is, like the background voices. And so, like, I worked on a show a couple of years ago, or about a year and a half ago, called Gen V, which is the spin-off show of The Boys.
Hmm.
And so I did all
Yeah.
the background voices on that. And
Oh wow.
I also worked on this first half of season 4 of The Boys, doing that same work. So something that I've started to do now is like when I'm in a coffee shop or I'm in a college environment or I'm around people at an airport, I'll like listen to the conversations and write down what's being said and what conversation starters there are, because a lot of this is just improv voicing, different people in different scenarios. So I'm like, oh, that's a good conversation starter, or that's a topic that I wouldn't have thought about to use here. So like that categorization in public is so more observational, not like saying things out loud, but yeah, I do think about it. It's not that it's not there, but I don't want to like freak people out just walking through, just get shopping for clothes.
No, especially after this
But yeah,
interview,
that's a good question.
if they watch this episode and then they see you in public, they'll be like, okay, he's here, he's listening to us, he's probably writing down
Right,
notes,
yeah,
he's mocking
yeah,
me. We
yeah,
don't want that
exactly.
to
Yeah,
happen. Yeah,
yeah,
I've always wondered
yeah,
that, because like
yeah.
it's not just a job to you guys, it's like a personality trait at
No.
this point, really. Like it's something you do. So I've always wondered, like, you got to have fun with it, like in public, just
Yeah,
change your voice up. And I would do it
yeah, you have
100%.
to. Oh, yeah,
100,
yeah.
just
I
have
mean, I
fun with
do
it.
it. Yeah, I do it with friends more, I think more consistently than anything. Like when we're out somewhere and I just see an opportunity, like it just kind of happens organically. And even like, but that is honestly the initial like thought process when I'm doing utility voiceover, which is a person that does a bunch of voices within an animated show, which I've done a lot for this show called Hamster and Gretel, which is a Disney Channel show that the same people that did Phineas and Ferb they created, Dan
Cool.
Povenmire and that whole team. I love being part of that cast. But my job is to come in and do like 6 different voices for a few episodes, and so the weird trait of like looking at sometimes inanimate objects and being like, this is what it sounds like, and that's my instinct. Like that's sort of what happens in real life, like when we're around like different things or people or characters that like sound nothing like that. Like my girlfriend and I watched through the Harry Potter series, and Hedwig says nothing. She's an owl. Before whatever reason, Hedwig sounds like this in my head. So when when she flies on the screen, you got to talk like this. So it's just funny to us, but things like that I'm doing.
I was like, I got to
So
interject here. You sounded like the Nutty Professor just right now.
yeah, yeah,
100%. All I
well,
heard was Nutty
yeah,
Professor.
yeah. Well, kind of ironic that you say that because one of the jobs I've done is I have voiced Mushu for a few Disney projects.
Yes, I saw
So
that.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah, which that's been quite an honor. But anyway, we'll get to that. But yeah, I keep going way longer than these answers
It's
should be.
all
But
good.
yes, yeah.
Hoarder, I think
Okay.
you got some questions you got lined up here
Oh,
for Mr.
Yeah.
I
IRS.
certainly do. I certainly
You're like,
do, Mr.
you're like, now I
IRS.
do. Yeah.
So, tell all of us about Thrillergram.
Thrillergram is such a cool project that my friend Cole Bladen created, and it's essentially a blend, in my opinion, of the best kind of radio drama with like incredible sound design, great scoring, original scoring, by our friend Renee. Renee Heisemiter, who like he composes it like out of it's incredible. And it's kind of like that classic radio drama and the Twilight Zone-ish kind of
Ooh.
feel. But it also includes stories that you're familiar with. Like he does some things that are like sort of in the Halloween universe, sort of in like different, and also like kind of also a little Black Mirror because there's some tales of technology, for example, that like kind of go in. Like one of my favorite episodes is called Eve, where a an AI assistant takes over the house. It's really cool. But he approached me during COVID, I think is roughly when he was doing it, a little bit before, and he said, "Hey, I have this idea for a show, and I want to try it out, and I think it's be really good." He's an amazing writer, first of all. He just like sits down and bangs out a script like nothing. Like I don't know where he gets his ideas from, but he's genius. But he said, "I need a narrator for this thing, and I would love for you to try a voice out." And so I did, and uh, it was like a couple of years before this point that I'm talking about where I sent just like a sample and he's like, "Yeah, here, just do it, whatever, you know." And then came later and he's like, "I think I want to do this for real." And so Thrillergram then became this like pseudo weekly, bi-weekly release of these amazing podcast radio play sort of episodes that I hope continue. You know, they kind of slowed down and stopped a little bit a couple of years ago, but Cole is looking for a new place to bring them back because I think there's so much fun and it's a way to listen to entertainment that isn't really super prominent anymore, like the whole radio show kind of vibe.
Yeah.
But this is like I mean, it's totally classic. Like it starts with the radio like crackling, like the tuning and all that. Like that's the first sound you hear when you start it, and like totally brings you into the world and like using terminology like the players of the show are like things like that. That's just so
Oh,
old school.
awesome.
So I love it. So yeah, so that's Thrillergram, and I'm happy to be. The name is Floyd Ferguson is the name of the narrator that I do.
Cool.
And yeah, but that's what Thrillergram is, and I love it. And I would whenever he calls me in, I'm like, yep, I'll do an episode. Don't care when it's happening, how it happens, just let me know. I'm always down because it's such good storytelling, in my opinion. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I was excited about that because on IMDb listing you as a producer and then also a
Yes.
performer. So I was very interested. What hat do you actually prefer to wear, producer or performer?
Yeah, so the producer role is actually new as far as Thrillergram goes. It's more of and I didn't really even know necessarily what the role of producer meant when I first was working on this with him. I was sort of like, yeah, I know the name, and I know that person like gets the Oscar if the movie wins, you know, Best Picture or whatever. But like, I don't know what, you know. But I've learned that it's sort of a decision-making role, and it's sort of a let's figure out how to move this project forward kind of role. And I'm not really like, you know, producing from an investment standpoint, like
Hmm.
money-wise, but I do have a production association with it because of being the narrator and everything. And I haven't really done a lot of this kind of work with it yet, just because we kind of had to stop for a few reasons again.
Sure.
But I'm curious about what it is because I have such a love of performing that I think that would instinctually be my number one thing
Hmm.
that I would like, and I think it always will be. But I have sort of with this and with other things been like, I wonder what the other aspects of the entertainment world are. Like, what is it? What does the director sort of do? What is a casting director involved with? Like those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So, and I've seen wonderful voice actors and actors that I love not graduate, that's a bad word to use, but sort of like move to another step. Like one of my favorite voice actors that I've worked with personally is Charlie Adler, who's the voice of Ickis and All Real Monsters. He's the original Buster in Tiny Toon Adventures.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
he's the voice of Cow and Chicken on Cow and Chicken. Like he's so many things. Wonderful, wonderful voice actor. And he is now one of Nickelodeon's, you know, he's been one of their main directors for a long time. So seeing him go from like incredible voice actor to director, I'm like, that's an interesting track. I wonder how that happens. And he's still being able to influence and help and um, have act because he teaches his own classes. So he like helps actors grow, and he's a very renowned name in the industry for voiceover. So like, I was like, that's interesting. I kind of want to learn what that end of it is. So like, to answer your question, I don't really know yet because I haven't really delved into it as much as I wanted to, but I am curious. I'm always curious about what's out there and what's next. So right now it's
Awesome.
performing, but who knows what, you know, could be, I guess.
Cool.
Yeah. That's a good question. I gotta think about that more. I like that.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, what
Yes.
project or franchise would you love to be part of?
Star Wars. That's the one.
Ooh,
That's the one that I haven't quite broken yet. Like I've done
okay.
everything else that I love. Like I've done Marvel, I've done DC, I've done Disney, I've done, all those things. Video game companies I've thought about working for, I've worked for. Um, I would say Star Wars. And the one thing I did do was I did some scratch voiceover for Galaxy's Edge when they were building that for Imagineering. I have a
Oh
partnership with
yeah.
Imagineering. So that's the one like little Star Wars thing. So anything Star Wars, and then the other side of the coin in video game world, if I can do literally anything, if they're even making it in The Last of Us Part 3,
Mm.
I freaking love that game. I think it's an incredible story. My good friend Misty Lee, she and I do a lot of voiceover together. I don't know if you guys know, she's an amazing voice actor, but one of my favorite credits of hers is she invented and is the voice of the clickers in The Last of Us.
Mhm.
That's her
Wow.
creation.
She's awesome.
So like, yeah, so she is. I love knowing that about her and just being a friend with her. But also, kind of a side note, this is just cool about being part of, friends with different people. Her husband is Paul Dini, one of the main writers and creators of Batman the Animated Series.
Yes.
So like, yeah,
Wow.
so they're married. And I went to their house for a Halloween party, which was amazing on its own. But I think my favorite thing that Paul has, he has so many cool things, but on the wall, that really famous photo that's Alex Ross painted of Joker and Harley, like with a black background, and he's like kind of holding her.
Mhm.
Yes.
He has the original hanging in his hallway, and it's signed by Alex Ross. And I was like,
Oh my
all right,
God.
I was like, all right, I'm in the right place. If my life choices have led me to this moment, I was like, this is pretty cool. But yeah, so Star Wars is definitely the next one because it means a lot and has been a very formative storytelling element in me and my brother's lives. So, if I can get in there with any of those animated shows or any of those shows on Disney Plus, like that'd be really cool, I think.
Would you prefer
So,
doing like a specific like beloved character or a new one?
at this point, I don't care, just because I want to be part of it. Just being part of it would be amazing, but I would love to take on. I can't really think of an original character that I would want to try to do. I think it would be cool to do a new one, just because Star Wars, as you both know, is such a vast place,
Yes.
and there's so many different ways that the threads of the story can go. I think it'd be cool to be part of something new or some other piece of it that we're not really aware of. So I think creating something new would be fun for me personally.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Did you and your brother videotape any of your guys' storytelling when you were kids?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Send those in. Those are your auditions.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, there one specific moment is this is so dumb, but I thought I created a camera shot when I was a kid, like when the camera's like moving forward, but you're zooming out and it creates that like tunnel thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like, I did it once. I was like, this is amazing. No one's ever seen this before. And so, I remember a very specific shot in my hallway as a kid where the lights were all off in the hallway. And I said a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And then I flipped the lights on at the same time as running down the hallway, but zooming out. And I was singing the Star Wars opening theme. That's somewhere. I've recorded that. I've seen it multiple times. I have all of my videotapes and VHSs are in a box ready to be digitized soon. And I want to do it because I don't want the tape to, disintegrate.
Sure.
But those memories are saved. So I'm going to be going through them at some point and
That's
put them all on
incredible.
the computer. But
That is
yeah,
great.
those are all there. It's all there somewhere.
You're holding auditions right there. Like you got it all.
I know.
You're
Yeah,
ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You invented
Yeah,
a camera shot. Like, come on.
I did. Yeah. Yeah. I have. Yeah, I'm gonna get Dave Filoni on the phone and be like, "Look, this is what you need in your shows right now."
Yes.
Yeah.
It's time stamped and everything.
I know. Yeah. Exactly.
So, how do you get yourself into the mindset to play a popular character like Bishop or King T'Chaka?
That's a great question. I just this has sort of been my philosophy with voiceover in general, and this is something I've learned from people that I've watched and that I love, is remembering the playfulness of it. And that sounds a little like, general, but play is serious in the world
Yes.
of voiceover. And what I mean by that is there's a great teacher, Richard Horvitz, who you recognize his voice. He's the voice
Zim,
of
right?
Zim, yes, and
Yes.
Billy and Mandy, and like
Yes.
I think he's
Huge
on Has
fan.
Been Hotel. I can't remember, but he's like he's a great person, but he has a class that he teaches, and he teaches about the power of play. And what he talks about is there was a point in your life, as we all had when we were kids, and we would be like outside up in the tree or in the sandbox or in the playground or whatever, like completely immersed in a world, like, if you're playing like a dragon or something, like this dragon is here to destroy the castle. And then your mom's like, we got to go home. So you're like, okay, mom, be there in a second. And then you're back in the. But that was so instinctual as a kid. Like you didn't even think about, but that is the element of immersion that we all try to go back to as actors now. It's just along the line we grow up and we kind of lose that thing. But so that's definitely one thing, is having no fear in releasing yourself into that completely imaginary world, because it's scary now as adults where we're like, oh, we can't do this because it means, our safety is a little bit less, our guard is down, we're more vulnerable, we're afraid to be more vulnerable. So I think that's a big piece of it for me, is just allowing myself to be wholly immersed in whatever that is. And then also to play iconic characters, I just move through it with a lot of respect and research. I know that for Bishop, for example, had to go back and look at Philip Aiken's original performance, who's the original Bishop in the 90s X-Men show. And I still need to reach out. I haven't talked to him personally, because he wasn't part of the the X-Men 97 rigmarole with all the things happening. But when I got the audition initially, that's where I went first. I went directly to the 90s. Thank goodness I live in an age of YouTube, because they're, actors back in the 90s. How do you research that without trying to find a tape or something of an old show? But the fact that I can go on YouTube and be like X-Men animated series Bishop, and I could find clips. So basing that off of his performance, or at least being inspired by, was extremely helpful. So there was those two things, but then the third element, which is I think the riskiest, is to trust myself with what I wanted to do, because this is the character that they're saying, we have this idea of who it is. We know that he comes from comics. We know that this is something people enjoy and people know about, but we also want your spin on it. And I think that part comes from just, again, a release, because it's not like I said, I'm going to do this muscle movement and this placement and this sort of physical, movement to get myself into a place where now I feel like Bishop. I just had to be like, I'm just going to do it, and this is how I see it, and hopefully that will work. And thank goodness it did. I mean, it was an audition process that lasted one audition, and then I got a call a month later, and I got the job.
Wow.
Damn.
But yeah, which was crazy. Yeah, because there's a huge variance of how people get work. I mean, I've had a ton of different versions of how I've gotten hired for stuff. But to come into it, I think having a love of, in this case, Marvel, or a love of what the original source material is, and a respect for it and a reverence for what is there, is important. And then allowing myself to have fun with what that is, because I don't want to be too rigid and be like, I don't want to be locked into this, box of like, oh, I got to make sure that I do it exactly the right way, because people are trusting our interpretation. And I've been very lucky that when I've talked to fans and talked to people after, they're like, we loved your performance, you're a great Bishop. And also it was a little bit of a responsibility jump for me with this role, just because not only is he this character that people enjoy and know about, but he's also one of the only Black X-Men that's in this part of the cast. And so to carry on this role with that and have a whole group of people that are also watching, I was like, oh, this is heavy to try to carry this on, but to have the conversation and commentary back from that community, be like, we loved what you did. I'm like, okay, good. Then I've done the job that I need to do. So I think coming at it with a sense of knowing what it is, releasing myself into the play, and also trusting my instincts of how I'm going to do it is how I sort of get into the mindset of an iconic character.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's worked so far. So, I'm really happy, and I'm very grateful. And King T'Chaka, that was sort of a more, not that Bishop isn't, but that started from an even deeper place for me, because one of the things that I've done for Disney is I voiced Black Panther for Disney Parks. So I've been doing the Chadwick Boseman version of the character for several years now for various things at Disney. So Avengers Campus here and in Paris, and several Disney Cruise Line projects, I've been doing the voice of the Chadwick version of King T'Challa. So that accent is something that lives in me now. And so kind of translating that to King T'Chaka to another Black Panther, and I'm wearing, the Black Panther Roosevelt's
Oh
here.
yeah.
Um, and to get that sort of connection and to get to play with that with someone that has literally passed on, that, and he as a person who meant so much to a lot of people,
Yeah.
that is definitely like when I went and did the first session, I was like, Chadwick, just come be in the room with me, please. Like, just I need you right now. Just trusting that his spirit was somewhere there. So that comes from an even like deeper on a heart level and a higher spiritual place to get to that, because that he Chadwick Boseman and Black Panther are both icons in my mind,
Yeah.
and
100%.
so sort of bridging that has been a huge like blessing on my life and like a huge opportunity. So that's sort of where I have to start, and then being able to build off that with my performance is just the icing on the cake, but to be able to carry it on has been very cool. So yeah, that's sort of all of those things in one is what I think about when I go for a character that has some sort of iconography or some sort of meaning
Awesome.
publicly like that. Yeah.
To me, the beauty of the movie War for Wakanda was basically that it was a catharsis for the
Yeah.
actors, the producers, like everyone involved that knew Chadwick Boseman. You could actually see in their performances, it was like catharsis for them dealing with the loss of him, and it
Oh
was
yeah.
amazing.
Oh yeah, and I don't know if you mind if I tell you a quick story of something
Oh,
that
go
I
ahead.
learned from.
Yeah.
So my friend Beth McGuire is the dialect coach for the films for Black Panther.
Uh huh. Oh wow. Oh. That was beautiful. Sure.
No
No, that was
problem.
amazing. That was great.
Oh man, like that character, like I wasn't really familiar with Black Panther until Chadwick. Um, I heard some stuff from the he appeared in an animated series a couple times. Christopher Judge appeared as in the Avengers game, which you worked alongside with as well. But Chadwick, when I think of Black Panther, I think of Chadwick Boseman. Just like when I think of Batman, I think of Kevin Conroy, who also sadly passed away. So it's like these characters are more than that to a lot of people. And when I watched Wakanda Forever, it was an emotionally difficult experience right from the beginning. And I was like, because you feel everything from that movie and how genuine it is. And yeah, whew, now you're changing the emotional dynamic of this conversation, Isaac. Hoarder, adjust this quickly, please.
I would be happy to take things light. We can make things lighter really quick, actually. So, not a question, but an observation. I'm guessing you really go by your initials. Not a lot of love for the IRS.
Well,
Ah.
it was. It took me a while to find your handle on Instagram because when I typed in your name, it came up IRS Voices, and I was like, okay, is that like a complaining Instagram about like taxes? So I couldn't find you, and so I
Yeah.
clicked. I was like, oh, that's actually him. Okay. You should have more followers, but you just can't get them. No one wants to follow
Yeah.
IRS.
Oh man. It has been amazing talking to you, Isaac. Thank you very much for this. Thank you.
So,
Hero, do you have
oh,
any
I
other
got a
questions?
lot because we still have a little bit of time here. So, Marvel's Avengers,
Awesome.
you played Theo, which was a um, what's the word? Inhuman that could teleport.
Oh,
How was that
yes.
experience for you? Because that is a game that means a lot to Hoarder and I. That's actually how we became friends, was because the
Yes.
Marvel's Avengers community. So when I saw you playing Theo, I was like, I can see that. I can see that. So that must have been a lot of fun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy how
Awesome.
that works. Yeah, it was. The one thing I will give credit for Marvel's Avengers is the voice acting and the writing. The voice acting, the
Yeah.
cast is phenomenal. It's a who's who of casting, and
Yeah.
crazy amazing. Like, when my daughter found out that Troy Baker's in it and he did Joel, she's like, "Oh my goodness!" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, Fred. I can never say Fred's last name, but he plays the Hulk. Thank you. I can never say it. It's one of those names where I'm like, I'm scared to pronounce that. It's just crazy. But you also, so you said you buy the games that you're in, or you try to. So did you have the fun experience of kicking your own ass as Venom in Spider-Man 2? As Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I had to bring that up. I recognize that name. So So for the superhero community, I want you guys to understand that when you play Spider-Man 2 and you're attacking Oscorp security, I want you to yell, take that IRS as you're doing it.
Yes. Yes.
Because now it's a different element.
Yes.
I hate the IRS. I'm gonna go beat Oscorp security. So before we wrap up here, you mentioned publicly of an upcoming project with Eyes of Wakanda, and now we understand your emotional attachment to the Wakanda Black Panther world. What can you speak about your own personal experience with this project?
Hmm.
Mm, hmm.
Uh,
Of course,
sure.
of course.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Ooh, 100%.
Hmm. Awesome.
It's it sounds incredible, and I share that excitement. But IRS, it usually it's not fun talking to you, but this has been a great experience talking to IRS. Isaac Robinson
Yes.
Smith. Thank you so much for the time. Um, and we would love to have you back in like 12 months just to update, see how things are going. By then, you'll probably have a lot more coming up. But also, I want to say that I am very proud of your performance in Bishop because
Yeah.
I grew up watching the original X-Men animation series, so I was a little bit skeptical with how I would feel 30 years later with the same characters. But you and the team killed it. Like
Yeah.
it's won awards. It's doing amazing. Can't wait for season two. Can't wait to see how you're involved if you are. But nonetheless, Isaac, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you.
And we will definitely have you back and we'll stay connected 100%. Thank you so much.
Yes.
No
Thank
problem.
you.